The massive Zephyrian warship Void Cleaver cut through space like a blade through water. Commander Thekvar stood on the bridge, watching the small blue world of New Haven grow larger on the main screen. His forearms crossed behind his back, as his pale yellow eyes studied the human colony. This would be another easy victory for the Galactic Council's finest warriors. "Commander," called his communications officer, "all squads report ready for planetary assault." Thekvar nodded. The humans had been lucky so far. Their first contact with the galaxy had gone well. Too well, perhaps. The Galactic Council had been gentle with them, treating them like children who needed protection. But humans had started asking questions about territory, about weapons, about things that made the Council nervous. Now it was time to remind them of their place. In the main briefing hall, 40 Zephyrian soldiers gathered around holographic displays. These were the best fighters in the galaxy. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall, with forearms and natural armor plating that could stop small weapons fire. They had conquered dozens of worlds and never lost a battle. Squad leader Nexel stepped forward, his black eyes gleaming with amusement. "Brothers, today we face the humans of New Haven. High Command expects complete surrender within 6 hours. The soldiers laughed. 6 hours seemed too long for such a weak species. "Let me share some intelligence about our enemies," Nexel continued, activating a cultural database. "The humans have sent us their historical records. They think this will help us understand them better." More laughter filled the room as files appeared on the displays. Ancient human writings, artwork, and stories filled the screens. Nexel began reading from the files, his voice thick with mockery. "Listen to this," he said. "The humans tell stories of warriors called berserkers who felt no pain in battle. They claim these fighters could take terrible wounds and keep fighting." The Zephyrian soldiers roared with laughter. Pain was the body's warning system. No intelligent being would ignore such warnings. "It gets better," Nexel continued. "They have legends of humans fighting for days without rest, food, or water. One story tells of a single human holding off an entire army at a narrow pass." "Impossible," called out one soldier. "No being can fight for days without rest." "Wait, there's more," Nexel said, scrolling through more files. "They have tales of warriors who grew stronger during battle. Humans who could lift impossible weights when angry. Fighters who became faster and more deadly as the fight went on." The laughter grew louder. Even the ship's support crew had gathered to hear these ridiculous stories. The humans clearly had active imaginations but no understanding of biology or physics. "My favorite," Nexel announced, "is the story of human mothers protecting their young. According to this, human females become incredibly dangerous when their offspring are threatened. One account claims a human mother lifted a 2-ton vehicle to save her child." The entire hall erupted in laughter. Female Zephyrians were smaller and weaker than males. The idea of a mother becoming a warrior was laughable. Dr. Velthra sat quietly, in the back corner of the briefing room. As the expedition's historian and cultural expert, she had studied many species before their conquest. Something about the human files troubled her, but she could not put her finger on what it was. While her colleagues laughed at human stories, Velthra noticed patterns. Every human culture, no matter where they lived on their planet, told similar tales of warriors with impossible abilities. The Vikings, the Celts, the Japanese, the Apache, all had stories of fighters who transcended normal limits in battle. "These myths are consistent across all human cultures," she said quietly. But her voice was lost in the laughter. "Doctor," Nexel called out, noticing her serious expression. "Surely you don't believe these fairy tales?" Velthra considered her words carefully. "I find it interesting that such similar stories exist across isolated populations. Usually myths vary greatly between cultures that had no contact." "They're just stories," Nexel dismissed. "Humans probably made them up to scare their enemies. Psychological warfare." The other soldiers agreed. Every species had myths and legends. None of them were real. Commander Thekvar entered the briefing room as the laughter died down. His presence commanded instant respect. "Final briefing," he announced. New Haven has 10,000 human colonists. Intelligence reports show minimal military presence. Most inhabitants are farmers, shopkeepers, and craftsmen. He activated a tactical display showing the colony's layout. We will land at dawn and demand surrender. If they resist, we will make examples of their leaders. Standard pacification protocol. What? About their myths, Commander? One soldier asked with a grin. Should we watch out for berserkers? The entire room burst into fresh laughter. Even Tekvar smiled. I doubt we'll encounter any mythical warriors. The humans will probably hide in their homes and beg for mercy. As the briefing ended and soldiers prepared their weapons, Dr. Velthra returned to her research station. She pulled up more human files, diving deeper into their cultural records. The more she read, the more concerned she became. The human stories weren't just myths. They were historical accounts with names, dates, and locations, battle reports written by military commanders, medical records describing impossible human feats, archaeological evidence supporting the wildest claims. One file particularly caught her attention. It was a human military study about something they called combat effectiveness under extreme stress. The research showed that humans could indeed perform far beyond their normal limits when fighting for survival. Their bodies produced chemicals that reduced pain and increased strength. Their minds could focus with laser precision, even while severely wounded. Velthra tried to share her findings, but her colleagues were too busy preparing for battle to listen. They had already made up their minds about humans based on first impressions. The night before the assault, she made one final attempt to warn Commander Tekvar. Sir, I believe we may be underestimating the humans, she said in his private office. Based on what evidence, he asked, not looking up from his tactical plans. Their cultural records show consistent patterns of extreme combat behavior. These aren't just stories, sir. They're documented historical events. Tekvar finally looked at her. Doctor, I appreciate your thoroughness, but we're dealing with a primitive species that barely understands space travel. Their historical events are probably exaggerated tales told around campfires. But sir, what if they're not? Tekvar's expression hardened. Then we'll find out tomorrow. But I assure you, no amount of mythical warrior spirit will stop plasma cannons and force shields. As dawn approached over New Haven, the Zephyrian forces prepared for what they expected to be their easiest conquest yet. 40 elite soldiers against 10,000 farmers and shopkeepers. The outcome seemed certain. None of them suspected that. In a few hours, they would discover the difference between fighting civilized species and fighting humans. None of them realized that the myths they had mocked were about to become their worst nightmare. The assault transports launched from Void Cleaver as the first light touched New Haven's surface. Commander Tekvar watched from the bridge, confident in his forces and dismissive of human capabilities. In her research station, Dr. Velthra monitored communications and waited for proof of her fears. She had studied too many species to ignore the warning signs in human culture. Something told her that the Zephyrians were about to learn a terrible lesson about the difference between myth and reality. The battle for New Haven was about to begin. 3 days had passed since the assault began. Commander Tekvar stood on the bridge of Void Cleaver, staring at casualty reports that made no sense. His forces should have conquered New Haven in hours. Instead, they were locked in brutal street-to-street fighting with no end in sight. Sir, Squad 7 requests immediate medical evacuation, his communications officer reported. They've taken heavy casualties in the Market District. Again? Tekvar's voice carried disbelief. That's the third squad to request evacuation today. The initial assault had gone wrong from the very beginning. When Zephyrian dropships landed at dawn, they expected to find terrified colonists hiding in their homes. Instead, they met organized resistance from people who should have been helpless civilians. Jake Morrison, the colony administrator, had somehow turned shopkeepers into soldiers overnight. His deputy, Lisa Hayes, coordinated defensive positions with the skill of a military commander. These were supposed to be simple farmers and merchants, not tactical experts. Get me squad leader Nexel, Tekvar ordered. Nexel's voice crackled through the communicator, exhausted and strained. Commander, we're pinned down near the school. The humans have fortified every building. What's your situation? We're fighting a human named Carl Davis. According to our intelligence, he's a maintenance worker, but he's been holding the eastern checkpoint for 18 hours straight. Sir, he has 3 plasma burns across his chest and he's still fighting. Thekvar paused. Plasma burns were incredibly painful and usually incapacitated victims immediately. Are you certain about his wounds? I saw them myself, sir. The burns should have put him in shock hours ago. Instead, he's charging our positions and screaming something the translators can't identify. Dr. Velthra's voice came through the bridge speakers. Commander, may I join this conversation? Go ahead, Doctor. Squad Leader Nexel, can you repeat what the human was screaming? It sounded like Valhalla and something about dying with honor. The translator suggests these are religious references. Velthra felt ice in her veins. She had read about Valhalla in the human files. It was connected to their ancient warrior culture, to fighters who believed dying in battle was glorious, the same culture that produced berserkers. Sir, Nexel continued, we're also dealing with a human female named Maria Santos. She owns a food shop, but she's been defending the supply depot for 6 hours without break. No food, no water, no rest. She just keeps fighting. More impossible behavior. Zephyrian soldiers needed regular breaks during combat. Fighting for 6 continuous hours without supplies was beyond their physical limits. Medical Officer Hargan to bridge, came another voice. Commander, I need to discuss our human prisoners. What about them? Their biological readings are wrong, sir. Completely wrong. I'm seeing adrenaline levels that should kill them. Pain. Suppressant chemicals in their blood that shouldn't exist in nature. Brain activity in regions we don't understand. Equipment malfunction? Thekvar suggested hopefully. I've checked 3 times, sir. The readings are accurate. These humans are operating on biochemistry that defies everything we know about biology. Dr. Velthra stepped forward. Commander, I need to share my research with the medical officer immediately. Later, Doctor. We have a battle to win. Sir, with respect, we might not win this battle if we don't understand what we're fighting. Before Thekvar could respond, another report came through. Commander, this is Squad 3. We have a problem. Report. We encountered a human child, sir. Maybe 12 years old. He was separated from his family during our advance through the residential sector. So, handle it according to protocol. Sir, the child attacked Squad Leader Nexel with a piece of sharpened metal. The boy showed no fear whatsoever. He wounded Nexel before we could stop him. Stunned silence filled the bridge. A human child had wounded one of their best fighters. Children of every known species ran from danger. Human children apparently ran toward it. How badly is Nexel wounded? Thekvar asked. Critical condition, sir. The child aimed for weak points in his armor with surgical precision, like he had studied Zephyrian anatomy. That was impossible. Human children couldn't have military training. Yet somehow a 12-year-old had nearly killed an elite warrior. Dr. Velthra could no longer stay quiet. Commander, I must insist on an emergency briefing. What we're witnessing matches exactly with human historical accounts. What accounts? The berserker myths we mocked yesterday. The stories about humans fighting beyond their physical limits. The tales of warriors who felt no pain. They're not myths, sir. They're historical records. Thekvar turned to face her, his expression dangerous. Are you suggesting that human fairy tales are real? I'm suggesting we misunderstood what we were reading. Human culture is built around warfare, sir. They've been fighting continuously for 10,000 years. No other known species has that kind of combat experience. Medical Officer Hargan's voice interrupted them. Commander, the doctor might be correct. I'm analyzing blood samples from wounded humans. They contain genetic markers I've never seen before. Markers that seem to activate under stress and alter their physical capabilities. Explain. Their bodies produce natural combat drugs, sir. Painkillers, strength enhancers, focus amplifiers. It's like they evolved specifically for warfare. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrians weren't fighting primitive colonists. They were fighting members of a warrior species that had been perfecting combat for millennia. Sir, came another report from the surface. This is Tactical Team 5. We've identified the human coordinating defenses in the northern sector. Military commander? No, sir. School teacher named Susan Clark. She's running night raids that have eliminated 6 of our observation posts. Her tactics are: professional grade, sir. A teacher conducting military operations. A maintenance worker fighting with impossible endurance. A shop owner holding positions for hours without rest. A child attacking trained soldiers without fear. Commander Thekvar began to understand that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. Dr. Velthra, report to my office immediately. Medical Officer Hargan, prepare a full analysis of human biological capabilities. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. As reports continued flooding in from the surface, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. The humans weren't just resisting the invasion, they were fighting with capabilities that should have been impossible for their species. Colony worker Pete Williams had organized supply lines that kept functioning despite constant attack. Mechanic Danny Cooper was building improvised weapons that actually damaged Zephyrian equipment. Nurse Betty Adams was treating wounded humans who then returned to battle with injuries that should have kept them bedridden. Every human seemed to possess skills they shouldn't have. Combat knowledge they couldn't have learned. Physical capabilities they shouldn't possess. In her research station, Dr. Velthra pulled up files she had dismissed earlier. Human military history stretched back thousands of years. Wars that lasted decades, conflicts that involved entire populations, battle tactics refined through centuries of experience. Other species fought when necessary. Humans had made warfare into an art form. She found records of human battles where impossible victories had occurred. Small forces defeating much larger armies. Individuals holding off thousands of enemies. Wounded soldiers fighting until they collapsed from blood loss. The Zephyrians had assumed these were exaggerated stories. Now they were discovering the stories were understatements. Bridge to all units, Commander Thekvar announced. New orders. Withdraw to defensive positions. Minimize engagement with human forces until further notice. His soldiers couldn't believe what they were hearing. The elite Zephyrian army was retreating from farmers and shopkeepers, but Thekvar was beginning to realize a terrible truth. The humans they were fighting weren't just desperate colonists. They were representatives of a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill enemies and survive impossible odds. And if ordinary human civilians could fight like this, what would trained human soldiers be capable of? The thought terrified him more than he cared to admit. For the first time in his military career, Commander Thekvar was beginning to understand what it meant to be afraid. On the surface of New Haven, the human defenders prepared for another night of fighting. They had no idea they were rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Dr. Velthra worked through the night while chaos erupted on the surface of New Haven. Her research station glowed with dozens of human cultural files, genetic studies, and archaeological reports that the Galactic Council's first contact teams had marked as low priority. Now, these dismissed documents might hold the key to understanding why the invasion was failing. She began with human mythology, but approached it differently than her military colleagues. Instead of looking for entertainment value, she searched for patterns. Every human culture told stories of warriors who transcended normal limits during battle. The consistency was disturbing. Norse sagas described berserkers who entered a trance-like state called berserker gang. In this condition, they supposedly felt no pain, gained tremendous strength, and fought with animal fury. Celtic myths spoke of warriors experiencing Riestrad, a battle transformation that made them nearly unstoppable. Ancient Irish texts described fighters whose appearance actually changed during combat. Their muscles swelled, their eyes glowed, and they became capable of impossible feats. Japanese records told of samurai who could fight for days without rest when defending their homes. What troubled Velthra most was that these weren't just stories told by one culture. They appeared independently across human populations that had no contact with each other. Vikings in Northern Europe, Celts in Western Islands, Japanese on Eastern Islands, Native Americans across vast continents, all described similar combat phenomena. She pulled up genetic analysis files from the first Contact medical surveys. Human DNA contained unusual markers in regions associated with stress response and hormone production. The survey teams had noted these anomalies, but dismissed them as evolutionary remnants with no current function. Velthra suspected they were wrong. She cross-referenced genetic data with archaeological evidence. Human burial sites showed signs of continuous warfare dating back 50,000 years. Weapons evolved constantly, becoming more efficient and deadly with each generation. Even human artwork focused heavily on conflict and combat. No other known species had such a consistent history of warfare. Most civilized races fought only when resources became scarce or territory was threatened. Humans seemed to fight for reasons that made no logical sense: honor, ideology, religion, even entertainment. The breakthrough came when she discovered human military research files that hadn't been included in their cultural database. These were scientific studies conducted by humans themselves about their own combat capabilities. One file documented something called hysterical strength, the ability of humans to perform impossible physical feats during emergencies. A human, mother lifting a vehicle to save her trapped child. A soldier carrying 3 wounded comrades while under enemy fire. A farmer fighting off a predator 10 times his size. Another study analyzed combat stress reaction, how human psychology changed during battle. The research showed that extreme stress could trigger altered states of consciousness, where pain decreased, strength increased, and time perception changed. The study concluded that these weren't psychological disorders, but evolutionary adaptations. Dr. Velthra sat back in shock. The human studies were describing the exact phenomena that their myths claimed as historical fact. What the Zephyrians had mocked as impossible stories, humans had documented as repeatable biological responses. She dug deeper into human evolutionary biology. Most sapient species descended from prey animals or cooperative hunters. Humans were different. They evolved from persistence predators, hunters who caught prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. This evolutionary background created unique traits. Humans could run farther than almost any other land animal. They could function with less sleep than most species. Their bodies produced more stress hormones and had better pain tolerance than seemed necessary for survival. But the most disturbing discovery was in human brain structure. Regions associated with empathy and self-preservation could be suppressed during extreme stress, while areas linked to aggression and tactical thinking became hyperactive. Humans could literally turn off parts of their personality that interfered with combat effectiveness. Velthra found military training manuals that described how to trigger these responses deliberately. Human armies didn't just teach soldiers to use weapons. They taught them to access altered mental states that made them more effective killers. The evidence became overwhelming. Human myths weren't fantasies. They were instruction manuals describing capabilities that every human possessed but rarely needed to use. She tried calling Commander Thekvar, but he was dealing with another crisis on the surface. Squad leader Rax then had encountered a human named Bobby Miller, a simple farmer who was holding an entire intersection against Zephyrian forces. Miller had been wounded twice, but continued fighting with increasing intensity. His behavior makes him no sense, Rax then reported. The more we hurt him, the more dangerous he becomes. It's like pain makes him stronger instead of weaker. Velthra knew exactly what was happening. Miller was experiencing the combat trance that humans had described for thousands of years. His body was producing natural drugs that blocked pain and enhanced performance. His mind was suppressing self-preservation instincts and focusing entirely on destroying enemies. She finally managed to reach Medical Officer Hargan, who was analyzing blood samples from human prisoners. Dr. Velthra, these readings are impossible, he reported. Human blood contains dozens of combat enhancement chemicals. Their bodies are producing them naturally in response to stress. What kind of chemicals? Pain suppressants stronger than our medical drugs. Adrenaline levels that would kill most species. Something that increases muscle strength by up to 40%. Compounds that improve reaction time and sharpen focus. It's like their entire biology is designed for warfare. Velthra's research had prepared her for this confirmation, but it was still shocking to hear. How long can they maintain these levels? That's the terrifying part. Some prisoners have been in this enhanced state for over 12 hours with no sign of fatigue. Their bodies seem capable of sustaining combat effectiveness far longer than should be possible. While they talked, more reports came in from the surface. Human defenders were coordinating attacks with precision that suggested military training, but intelligence files showed these were ordinary civilians: teachers, mechanics, shopkeepers, farmers. Velthra realized the truth was even worse than she had feared. Humans didn't need military training to be effective fighters. Their entire culture was built around conflict. Children played games that taught tactical thinking. Adults watched entertainment that focused on combat scenarios. Even their civilian governments maintained detailed war plans. Every human was a potential soldier waiting for activation. She discovered historical files that proved this theory. When humans faced existential threats, entire populations transformed into military forces. Farmers became guerrilla fighters. Factory workers built weapons. Children served as messengers and spies. Teachers coordinated resistance movements. The pattern repeated throughout human history. Invasion forces that seemed overwhelmingly powerful would encounter resistance far beyond what military analysis suggested was possible. Humans had a capability that no other species possessed: the ability to turn civilian populations into effective armies almost instantly. Dr. Velthra, finally, understood why the invasion was failing. The Zephyrians hadn't attacked a colony of helpless farmers. They had attacked a fortress world populated by a warrior species that considered combat training a basic life skill. She tried once more to reach Commander Thekvar, but he was monitoring a developing crisis. Human forces were no longer just defending their positions. They had begun launching coordinated counterattacks that were systematically destroying Zephyrian supply lines and communication networks. Pete Williams, the colony worker, had organized hit-and-run tactics that targeted weak points in Zephyrian positions with surgical precision. Susan Clark, the school teacher, was leading night raids that eliminated sentries without triggering proximity alarms. Bobby Miller, the farmer, had inspired other humans to adopt his fearless fighting style. These weren't random acts of desperation. They were coordinated military operations being conducted by people who supposedly had no formal training. Velthra's analysis revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Human culture preserved military knowledge through stories, games, and traditions. Every human grew up hearing tales of famous battles, learning about tactics and strategy, absorbing lessons from thousands of years of warfare. They didn't need formal military education because their entire society functioned as an informal military academy. As dawn broke over New Haven, Dr. Velthra prepared her emergency report for the command staff. She had uncovered a truth that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans weren't a primitive species learning to fight. They were the galaxy's most experienced warriors, beings who had been perfecting the art of warfare since before Zephyrian civilization even existed. And the colonists of New Haven represented only a tiny sample of human capabilities. If ordinary farmers and shopkeepers could fight like this, what would happen when Earth's actual military forces arrived? The question terrified her, because she suspected the Zephyrians were about to find out. Dr. Velthra burst into the command center carrying data files that she believed would save what remained of their mission. Commander Thekvar stood hunched over tactical displays showing red zones across New Haven's map. Nearly 60% of their original force was either dead, wounded, or missing. "Commander, I must brief you immediately on human capabilities," Velthra announced. "Not now, Doctor," Thekvar replied without looking up. "We have new problems. Human reinforcements have arrived from neighboring colonies." The main screen showed transport ships landing outside New Haven's borders. Hundreds of humans were disembarking, but these weren't soldiers either. Intelligence reported that the new arrivals included miners from New Perth, construction workers from Haven's Rest, and teachers from the Orbital Education Station. "More civilians," muttered squad leader Rax then, his voice carrying exhaustion and fear. "But they're organizing military formations like trained professionals." Velthra watched the display in growing horror. The reinforcements were setting up defensive positions, supply lines and communication networks with an efficiency that suggested years of practice. Yet according to their files, these were ordinary working people with no formal military experience. "Commander," she said more urgently, "what you're seeing is exactly what my research predicted. These humans aren't just civilians, they're members of a warrior species that—" A priority alert interrupted her. "Command, this is Reconnaissance Team Delta. We have a situation developing in the eastern sector." "Report," Thekvar ordered. "Sir, we're observing a human named Pete Williams coordinating what appears to be a complex military operation. He's directing multiple units in simultaneous attacks on our supply convoys." Thekvar checked his intelligence files. "Pete Williams is listed as a mining equipment operator." "Yes, sir, but he's conducting operations that would challenge our best tactical officers. He's destroyed 3 supply convoys in the past 4 hours using coordinated strikes from multiple directions." Dr. Velthra stepped forward. "Commander, please let me explain what's happening. Pete Williams doesn't need formal military training, because human culture has been teaching warfare skills for thousands of years." "That's impossible," Thekvar replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. Another report came through. "Command, this is Medical Team 7. We need immediate evacuation from the hospital district." "What's your situation?" "We're trapped by a human female named Susan Clark. Our intelligence shows she's a school teacher, but she's leading coordinated night raids that have eliminated 12 of our positions." "A teacher conducting night raids?" Thekvar's disbelief was evident. "Sir, her tactical knowledge appears equal to our special operations training. She's using terrain advantages, coordinated timing, and psychological warfare techniques that shouldn't be known by civilian populations." Velthra seized the moment. "This is exactly what I've been trying to tell you. Susan Clark knows these tactics because human children learn strategic thinking through games that are actually military simulations. Their entertainment focuses on combat scenarios. Their entire culture is built around warfare." Medical Officer Hargan's voice joined the conversation from the ship's medical bay. "Commander, Dr. Velthra's research aligns with my biological findings. These humans possess genetic adaptations that I've never seen in any species." "Explain." "Their bodies can enter enhanced combat states that improve strength, reduce pain sensitivity, and sharpen reflexes. But more importantly, they can sustain these states far longer than should be biologically possible." "How much longer?" "Sir, some human prisoners have maintained peak combat effectiveness for over 20 hours straight. Their stamina and endurance capabilities are beyond anything in our experience." Commander Thekvar felt the first real fear of his military career. His forces were being defeated by shopkeepers and farmers who possessed capabilities that defied everything he understood about biology and warfare. "Dr. Velthra, give me your complete analysis." "Now." Velthra activated her research displays. "Commander, humans aren't a primitive species. They're the most experienced warriors in the galaxy. They've been fighting continuous wars for 10,000 years. 10,000 years? Every human culture has detailed military traditions. They preserve tactical knowledge through stories, games, and cultural practices. A human child knows more about warfare by age 12 than most species learn in a lifetime." "Squad." Leader Rax then, monitoring surface communications, interrupted with a trembling voice. "Commander, we have a bigger problem. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple fleet signatures approaching the system." "Zephyrian reinforcements?" "No, sir. The signatures match human ship designs. It appears Earth has dispatched a military response fleet." The command center fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. If ordinary human civilians could fight like this, what capabilities would trained human soldiers possess? Dr. Velthra continued her briefing with new urgency. Humans have a unique evolutionary background. They descended from persistence predators, hunters that caught prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. This created a species with unmatched endurance and an instinct for prolonged conflict. What does that mean for our forces? It means every human is essentially a potential soldier. Their biology, psychology, and culture are all designed for warfare. What we're fighting isn't a colony of civilians. It's a fortress world populated by members of a warrior species. Medical Officer Hargan added supporting evidence. My analysis confirms this. Human DNA contains markers that activate during combat stress, enhancing their physical and mental capabilities. They can literally transform themselves into more effective fighters. Another report from the surface confirmed their worst fears. Command, this is Forward Observer Unit 3. The human reinforcements are not behaving like civilian refugees. Explain. They've integrated seamlessly with local defenders and begun launching coordinated offensives. A human named Danny Cooper, listed as a maintenance worker, has organized armor-piercing attacks that are destroying our heavy equipment. Maintenance worker? Yes, sir. But he's demonstrating knowledge of Zephyrian technology that our own engineers would envy. He's targeting weak points in our vehicles with precision that suggests detailed study of our designs. Velthra nodded grimly. Human culture includes detailed analysis of potential enemies. They study everything: biology, technology, tactics, psychology. They've probably been analyzing Galactic Council military capabilities since first contact. The scope of human preparation became clearer with each report. These weren't desperate people fighting for survival. They were members of a species that had been preparing for this kind of conflict for their entire evolutionary history. Sir, came another transmission from the surface. This is Squad Leader Kexmar. We're observing something unprecedented. Report. The humans are using their wounded as tactical advantages. Injured fighters who should be incapacitated are continuing to provide support, intelligence, and even direct fire support from their positions. That doesn't make sense. Sir, a human named Maria Santos has 3 serious wounds but continues coordinating supply distribution. She's been awake and active for over 30 hours straight. Medical Officer Hargan confirmed the impossibility. Commander, those injuries should have required immediate medical attention and extended recovery. No known species can function effectively with that level of physical damage. Dr. Velthra provided the explanation. Humans can suppress pain and maintain functionality even with severe injuries. It's an evolutionary adaptation that allowed their ancestors to survive prolonged hunts and conflicts. The command staff began to understand the true nature of their opponents. They weren't fighting a species that had learned warfare recently. They were fighting beings who had been naturally selected for combat effectiveness over thousands of generations. Commander, reported the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the human colony leadership. Put it through, Jake. Morrison's voice filled the command center. Despite days of continuous fighting, he sounded calm and confident. Commander Thekvar, this is Colony Administrator Morrison. I'm requesting a parley under Human Rules of War. Human Rules of War? Dr. Velthra quickly accessed cultural files. Commander, humans have formal protocols for military conflicts that date back thousands of years. They have detailed rules for prisoner treatment, negotiation procedures, and tactical limitations. The idea that a primitive species had developed sophisticated military protocols was another shock to Zephyrian assumptions. Very well, Thekvar replied to Morrison. State your terms. Face-to-face meeting aboard your vessel. Small delegation from each side. Discussion of current situation and potential resolution. As preparations began for the meeting, Dr. Velthra realized this was the moment when the Zephyrians would finally understand the true nature of humanity. Morrison wasn't just coming to negotiate surrender. He was coming to deliver a warning about what would happen when Earth's real military forces arrived. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the Void Cleaver with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to exist. Behind him came Lisa Hayes and Carl Davis, the maintenance worker whose impossible endurance had terrorized Zephyrian forces for 3 days. Despite his plasma burns, Davis moved with steady determination. Commander Thekvar waited in his conference room, flanked by Dr. Velthra and Medical Officer Hargan. The sight of Morrison surprised him. The human looked like an ordinary administrator, middle-aged, average height, wearing simple colonial clothing. This unremarkable person had organized a defense that humbled the galaxy's finest military force. Commander Thekvar, Morrison said, taking a seat without invitation. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. You said you wanted to discuss resolution. Thekvar replied carefully. Morrison smiled, and something in that expression made the Zephyrian commander uncomfortable. Resolution, yes. But first, I think we should clarify what's been happening on New Haven. Your people have resisted our pacification efforts. Resisted? Morrison's eyebrows rose. Commander, we haven't been resisting, we've been holding back. The room fell silent. Dr. Velthra felt her worst fears beginning to materialize. I don't understand, Thekvar said. Morrison gestured to Carl Davis. Carl here is a maintenance worker. He fixes water pumps and repairs farming equipment. He has no formal military training. Morrison paused. Yet he's been fighting your elite soldiers for 3 days with injuries that should have killed him. Davis spoke for the first time. Commander, I learned to hunt when I was 8 years old. Started playing war games when I was 5. Every human does. We grow up studying battles, learning tactics, understanding how to kill things that want to kill us. But you're civilians, Thekvar protested. Lisa Hayes laughed. Sir, there's no such thing as a human civilian. We're all soldiers who happen to have other jobs. Morrison activated a portable display that showed Earth's approaching fleet. Commander, those ships carry our actual military forces. Professional warriors with genetic optimization, technological enhancement and training that makes our colonial militia look like children. Dr. Velthra's voice was barely a whisper. How many ships? 47 warships, 12 assault carriers, and 60 support vessels, Morrison replied casually. About 50,000 trained soldiers plus their equipment. The numbers were staggering. The Zephyrian expedition had brought 1 ship and 40 soldiers. But more importantly, Morrison continued, they're commanded by Admiral Bobby Kane. He's fought in 17 major campaigns and never lost a single battle. Morrison's tone remained conversational, as if discussing weather. Admiral Kane specializes in what we call total war. When humans fight seriously, we don't just target military forces. We destroy the enemy's ability to make war, their industry, their supply lines, their civilian infrastructure, their will to continue fighting. Thekvar felt cold fear spreading through his body. Are you threatening genocide? Not at all, Morrison replied. I'm explaining human military doctrine. When we fight to win completely. We don't believe in limited conflicts or negotiated settlements with aggressors. Carl Davis added, Commander, your people attacked our families. In human culture, that means you've started a war that can only end one way. What way? Morrison's smile disappeared. With your complete defeat or our total extinction. Humans don't surrender when our children are threatened. Medical Officer Hargan spoke up nervously. But surely your leaders are rational beings. They must understand the costs of continued warfare. Lisa Hayes answered, Sir, you don't understand how human leadership works during wartime. Our politicians become irrelevant. Military commanders take control, and they answer only to the people whose families were attacked. Morrison reactivated his display. Let me show you something from our history. This is the Battle of Stalingrad, where humans fought building to building for 200 days. This is the Siege of Bastogne, where surrounded soldiers held their position until relief arrived. This is Iwo Jima, where humans fought for every meter of ground against impossible odds. The images showed human warfare at its most brutal. Soldiers fighting in the ruins of cities, civilians taking up arms against invaders, entire populations choosing death over surrender. These aren't exceptional cases, Morrison explained. This is how humans fight when our homes are threatened. We don't retreat. We don't negotiate. We fight until the enemy is completely destroyed or we're all dead. Dr. Velthra found her voice. Mr. Morrison, surely some humans prefer peace to warfare. Of course, Morrison replied. Most humans hate war, but we're very good at it, and we understand that sometimes violence is the only way to protect what we love. He stood and walked to the conference room's viewport looking down at New Haven. Commander, your forces have been fighting what you would call children and elderly civilians. Our actual fighters, the young, strong, trained ones, evacuated the non-combatants and are waiting for your next move. Waiting? Carl Davis grinned, showing teeth that had been damaged in fighting. We wanted to see what you could do before our real soldiers arrived. Now we know. The implications hit Commander Thekvar like a physical blow. The devastating resistance his forces had encountered came from the least capable human defenders. The actual warriors hadn't even participated yet. Morrison returned to his seat. Here's what's going to happen. Admiral Kane will arrive in 6 hours. He'll offer you one chance to surrender and leave this system peacefully. And if we refuse, then you'll discover the difference between fighting human civilians and fighting human soldiers. Lisa Hayes provided specifics. Human military forces use tactics your people have never encountered. We have weapons designed specifically for fighting in space, on planets, and in urban environments. Our soldiers are trained from childhood and enhanced with technology that makes them faster, stronger, and more deadly than baseline humans. How much more deadly? Medical Officer Hargan asked. Morrison consulted his files. A human Marine can fight effectively for 72 hours straight without rest. They can survive injuries that would kill unenhanced humans. Their reflexes are fast enough to dodge energy weapons fire at close range. The Zephyrians sat in stunned silence as the full scope of human military capabilities became clear. But most importantly, Morrison continued, human soldiers fight with the knowledge that they're protecting their species' survival. That makes them willing to use tactics and weapons that other civilizations consider unethical, such as? Morrison's expression became grim. Suicide attacks, biological weapons, planetary bombardment, civilian targeting, anything necessary to win. When humans fight for survival, we abandon every rule of civilized warfare. Dr. Velthra realized that her research had only scratched the surface of human capabilities. Mr. Morrison, how long has your species been preparing for interstellar conflict? Since we achieved spaceflight. Every human military academy studies theoretical alien invasion scenarios. Every human colony has defense plans. Every human ship carries weapons capable of planetary assault. Morrison stood to leave. Commander Thekvar, I came here to offer you information, not to negotiate surrender. The decision about what happens next belongs to Admiral Kane. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Morrison turned back one final time. Commander, there's something else you should know. New Haven isn't just a farming colony, it's a military recruitment center. What does that mean? It means every person you've been fighting is a volunteer for Earth's colonial military forces. They came here specifically to learn how to defend human settlements against alien attack. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The Zephyrians hadn't attacked helpless farmers. They had invaded a training facility full of future human soldiers. The people who fought your forces weren't fighting for their lives, Morrison explained. They were practicing for the real war they knew was coming. As the human delegation left the ship, Commander Thekvar sat in his conference room staring at intelligence reports that now seemed completely meaningless. Everything the Galactic Council believed about humans was wrong. Dr. Velthra spoke into the silence. Commander, we need to withdraw immediately. The Galactic Council expects a victory report. Sir, there won't be any survivors to file reports if we stay. 6 hours later, Admiral Bobby Kane's fleet arrived at New Haven. The Earth Defense Force flagship UES Freedom dwarfed the Zephyrian vessel. Kane's opening transmission was brief. Zephyrian forces, you have attacked a human colony and killed human civilians. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally and submit to war crimes tribunals, or we will demonstrate why attacking humans is considered the stupidest mistake in galactic history. Commander Thekvar looked at his tactical displays showing 47 human warships surrounding his single vessel. His 40 elite soldiers faced 50,000 human Marines who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Communications, send a message to the human fleet. We surrender unconditionally. As Zephyrian forces prepared for capture and imprisonment, Dr. Velthra completed her final report on human capabilities. Her conclusions would change everything. The Galactic Council thought they knew about Earth's newest members. Humans weren't just another species joining galactic civilization. They were a civilization of warriors who had spent 10,000 years